Welcome back to Refactoring Paleo, where we take a 20-year-old Mac app and modernize it. This episode, we're going back to the document. What we've been doing over the last while is trying to split out the process of saving and reading the document files. The document files have been too deeply integrated in the application, so it makes it very, very difficult to make any changes whatsoever. Now, you can argue that this is spaghetti code. You can argue that it's just badly designed code. All those things are true. The question is, how do we go back and fix it? And that's what we've been doing for months, is splitting out that code slowly but surely. But now I want to jump back into the document. Our whole goal originally, near the beginning of this process, was to simplify the document file and then maybe even switch it to Swift. This process is also going to affect other classes because other classes depend on the document and they're going to have to change how they communicate with the document. So it's going to be a rather interesting set of changes, along with a lot of really boring, uninteresting, but helpful cleaning up of stuff. Before we get started, I do want to kind of remind ourselves of a couple of things. One is design patterns. Design patterns exist mainly to help developers visualize and place code in reasonable places. At the time I originally wrote the app, the most popular design pattern that Apple was pushing was the MVC design pattern, which is Model View Controller, where we separate out code for the model into the model, all the view code into the view, and all the life cycle and everything else code goes into the controller. Now, since then, a lot of other design patterns have been cropping up and becoming more and more popular. And the reason for that is this is a very simple layout of design, but it doesn't necessarily end all be all. The notorious thing about MVC design within the Apple ecosystem is that the controller often gets really large and unwieldy. But the thing is, this is really how code should be put together at some level. All of these different design patterns for this sort of thing are just variations of this theme. What might be interesting to think about is that the MVC isn't necessarily the vernacular of Apple's ecosystem. You don't have to have a NS View controller to be the controller. You don't have to have a NS View to be the view, or UI controller, view controller, or a UI view. It can be a wide range of things. And I bring this all up because our document is really a controller. It's not, you don't want to call it a document controller because there's another type out there in AppKit that is a document controller. So we don't use that terminology, but that's what it is. When you build a document file, it's building the model, it's building the view, and it manages the three in a life cycle. So it's exactly a controller. And when you think about it that way, what goes into that file seems a little different. And when you look at the code as it is, what I have in there, a lot of that stuff makes no sense being in a controller. And why does it make no sense? Well, largely the whole purpose of this idea of splitting up your code into manageable pieces is to reduce coupling between the three. For example, the view doesn't necessarily need to know anything about the controller. The view does need to know some about the model, which is why view models have become popular, but it doesn't necessarily need to know everything about them. What are we talking about? We're talking about trying to reduce coupling between types. If we have two types with no coupling whatsoever, those two types simply never communicate. Much of the application is never going to talk to each other, so there's no coupling. So you can move those around with no problem. But if you have tight coupling, what ends up happening, the types know too much about the other types. You want to minimize how much one type knows about the other. And you want to get something in the middle where you have a little bit of contact between the types, but you want to keep it as small as possible. That allows you to change things out, moving it around much, much easier. And in modern coding, matter of fact, in coding back then too, we were using tools like protocols to simplify these connections. Today, we can also use things like combine to simplify these connections. So what we need to do is take a look at our document and start thinking about how we can get rid of all the useless code and then reduce all this coupling that's going on. Simplify it, make the document a controller and not doing too much. So let's jump into it. Here we are back in Xcode. One of the first things you might notice after our discussion about coupling is we have some confusion already if you look on the file list. If you remember, I said really a document is truly a controller, but it has a zib. Now that zib is the view, but actually what controls the view is a window controller because the document zib is actually a window. So we're already getting confused. The Xrows document zib is actually controlled by the Xrows window controller, which is a bit weird if you think about it. And if you go into the document itself, we can find where that's being made, and that's make Windows controllers. This is exactly the kind of a job a controller would do, is to make the views. So we're creating it here with a zib and then setting it to our controller. And then guess what? We're setting the document model to be the model for that window controller. So that makes complete sense. The document is really a controller. But let's just start looking for stuff we can just get rid of right away. One thing we can start doing is going here, see what's being used. So that's being used externally. That's not being used at all. Comment this out. It's being used by the window controller. It's also being used by the window controller. Also being used by the window controller. Also being used by the window controller. That is no longer being used. No longer being used. And this is not being used externally. Okay, let's see if it builds. Okay, so I've gone ahead and split my screen so that on the left I have the header and on the right I have the actual code. So let's go down through here and double check that we don't use these things. Right. Okay, that's still in use. Go to document in-memory store. So this piece is exciting because that means nobody is asking for the pointer to the SQLite database, which is great, which also means I can get rid of this and get rid of that. Sometimes I like a little bit of space there. Let's build it while I'm continuing. So build succeeded, get rid of that. This is being used internally, so let's go ahead and see if I have, I could actually make this an internal header to make it private, but we don't necessarily need to do that. It's already building just fine. All right, let's build. Okay, now I will stress that being Objective-C sometimes this whole process of getting rid of code can be a little dangerous, but we're going to go for it and see what happens. So I just want to look for things that aren't being called. That's being called. That's going to be called. That's going to be called. Make window controllers. Print document. Now we'll talk about presenting errors in a future episode, but that's something that we're not going to do right now. This is something that we need to address. This is not a normal function or a method inside a document. This is actually coming from the window controller. So if we show callers, this is coming from the window controller where it's finishing up reading stuff and configuring the views and then calls back to the document, which is weird. It shouldn't do that sort of thing. So this is one of the things we need to clean up along with this. So that's still being called from the outside. Question is why, but it's something we need to fix. Still being called externally. That's being called. That's being called there. That's being called. This is another really weird one to be inside a document, but there it is. Let's see. Aha. So this one is not being called anywhere. So if we delete it, it still thinks the code is there, but that was something we can now remove. Let's build and make sure we didn't break anything. Built just fine. Again, the window controller is doing all sorts of stuff that it probably shouldn't be. This import table is another example. And I'll explain why some of this stuff got in here in a minute, but we're at the end. So let's go ahead and talk about how this stuff ended up here. There is a design pattern called dependency injection, where you're supposed to figure out what all your dependencies are and inject those dependencies when that type is created. Now, if you don't have a lot of confidence in understanding dependency injection, you may end up with patterns like this, where you realize that, oh, I don't have this thing, so let's go call the thing that actually has it. So there's a lot of things that a number of these methods are here because they have access to the document and the document has access to other things. So they were called into the document when we should have injected the dependencies into the other types. If you look at this, there's a thing like the main window controller. This is something that requires the document model, and originally that would have been in the document, so that didn't work. So this particular type is calling this import table into the document instead of in the window controller. So this is an example of something that could be moved. And one thing more I want to check before getting in some of these bigger changes is just to make sure we're using all this stuff up here. Go back to the top and just check it. Pretty sure that's being used. Pretty sure this is being used. No, it isn't. It's commented out. That doesn't seem to be used. Oops. I guess I do need that. And we can get rid of that. So I'm not sure about these, but I'll check on them at a future point. I don't want to start messing with those. Actually, I could just comment them out and see if it generates any errors. When in doubt, just build and look for errors. It doesn't seem to need these two. All right. Actually, I'm curious if I need that one. Yes. Okay. So what I'm going to do at this point, I'm going to run tests. Not that there are very many. It'd be better if I had a bunch of tests surrounding everything so that when I make a change, it's going to be okay. But in this case, the tests aren't there. But tests pass. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to take a quick break. I'm going to commit, and then we'll move on. Okay, I've committed, and now we're going to move on to the next thing, and we're going to look at the different properties really quickly. I see a warning now that we have a problem, that we're not conforming to this protocol. Let's take a look at the protocol. So what does this mean? It means that some of the stuff we deleted was actually a requirement for a protocol, and Xcode didn't make it obvious that was the case. Again, sometimes the protocol follow-throughs don't really show up. So let's see if we can bring that code back. So let's go back and look at what we've changed here. Oh, and this is actually the number one reason why I don't like zibs is you just open the file and all sorts of things change in it, and you end up committing that. I hate zibs. Let's go back and let's find the methods that we took out. So these two we took out because it was in a weird place, but we need to put it back. Actually, I think we only need this. Let's go back. So let's go back and look at the protocol again and see what we need. sure why that's there. So let's make sure we declare why this is here. See if that warning goes away. Okay, it went away. So now that we have that fix in, let's take a look at our properties. Some of these properties we need. We need this property because we got to maintain the window controller. We need this property because we have to maintain the document model. So let's move that down. This is something that we have to maintain for now, simply this current sheet controller, because whenever we show a sheet, you have to hold on till it actually fully dismisses. And that can be a little tricky, especially with the MVC design pattern. So we need to watch for that. We have the table import coordinator, but there's a good chance that this is going to go somewhere else. So let's put that down here. But these top two properties are the model. We've been moving to the document model, but we still have two hunks of the model still here. And that's a piece of confusion we want to get rid of. So let's see if we're actually using these things. So data sets. Initialize them. We're subscribing to them from the document model. We're adding the server, and we're looking for these things in the document model so that they update. We have a function that says load datasets, but what are we doing with it? Saying datasets with name, and who's calling that? This. And this just gets it from the document model anyway. So that implies that we really want to get rid of this crazy piece of code here. Where would we put it? Well, for now, we should put it in the window controller. It's not our final resting place for this, but it's going to go in the window controller. It massively needs refactoring anyway, but it really should not be in the document. All right, so now we're going to split screen. And we're just going to jam it in here for now. Let's see where it generates an error. So we have quite a few. Let's just take it from the top. So we're getting a list of names for tables or data sets. And then we're asking for that data set from a list of data sets. All right. Let's go to our document model. The question is, can we replace this with the call to the document model? And we may or may not have this. Data sets. Create a data set. Update a data set. It doesn't look like we have a way to access the data set by name here. So let's see if we can find a good place for a function like that. We'll just put it up here in general for now. That is simple enough. Let's go ahead and replace that over here. So let's start with this. Now this code could be a lot better. I don't necessarily like what I'm doing here, but all that code's going to get changed and move around anyway. I just want it to work. So let's see what else is on. We probably don't have the header up here imported, so let's get that imported. And let's see how much of a change we got. I did a fresh build just in case. Import this guy. Do a build while I scroll back down. All right. So that's building. Now, realistically, worry about that later. Realistically, this code here does not necessarily work right anyway. So I just want to make sure all the calls work. So this was originally to the document. So now it's just to self. Let's do a build. And let's get rid of it over in the document. So now all this can go away. All right. Notice I didn't really test anything. I'm not sure how much of that's going to stay. I probably should. I might do that off camera, but we made it a big accomplishment here, so I'm going to take another quick break. Let's commit all this, and then we'll come back. All right, we're back, and we want to take a look at datasets again. Can we get rid of it? So we can edit, we subscribe, load datasets. We just set the value. We're not really accessing it anymore. Let's see what happens if we comment everything out. I'm just going to go ahead and delete that because it's easy. Don't need that at all. Comment that out. Nope. All right, let's just get rid of this now. Now, given that we have version control, I could have just deleted that and we'd been okay, but I'm still a little paranoid. I started programming along before I had access to version control, and I'm always a little bit nervous about it. All right, what about tables? So the one thing in here that seems to be important is this method call right here, update table in the main window controller. So let's find this here. So here we reload the data in the table. But the question is, who's actually controlling that? So here we have a bit of a bug because we're not really, a bit of a weird thing here. And I'm a little suspicious about it. So let's go, where am I? I'm in the document. So let's go back here. So we have a table list controller. How is that getting set? That has a list of table names. Its data source is the document model. Look at this. It's actually updating through combine whenever the list changes, or at least should be. So that means all this stuff we're doing with updating the table for the table list is kind of pointless because this should all be handling it on its own. So to get rid of all of this stuff, we also have to get rid of modifying the table list. So this all goes away. See if it's in the header first. Actually, before we get rid of that, let's just get rid of it over here. We should never have to make this call anymore. So we use tables anywhere else. It's only internal. So let's get rid of this. And then we can think about getting rid of all of that. And you know what? We don't have a layers list anymore either. So let's get rid of this. Get rid of this whole thing. We don't need to do any of this stuff. And get rid of that. Oops, maybe not that. Oh yeah, that. Okay. Get rid of all that. We don't need to do this. Don't need to do that. So let's build. That seemed to build okay. So now we're not feeding any information to the window controller about the tables. So if we run this and open a test file, we should still get a list of tables. And we do. So we're good to go. We didn't need any of that code. All right. Don't need that. That's probably in the window controller. Yep. All right. Put that back in the document. Come back over here. This doesn't do a doggone thing anymore, so let's delete it and see what breaks. Nothing broke. So we do need to go into the header, make sure we get rid of that piece of code. So now in our document model, we've gotten rid of pretty much everything that the document, or excuse me, in the document, we've pretty much gotten rid of everything that the document model should be handling. But there's more to do here. So here we have the await from nib that bothers me so much. What is it doing? If you look carefully, all it's doing is dealing with window size. And this should really be handled over here because we should have it when we create this window. And we're even setting the frame right here. But before we get there, we also do this configure documents. We do. Let's go ahead and do that. Look at that real quick. I want to see what that does. Look at that. It's also just setting the frame of the window. So we're doing it like 3 times. Here we're telling the document to configure itself when only it's dealing with the window size. Then we find the document controller. Not entirely sure why. I'm not really sure what this is really meant to do, but let's refactor this a bit so we can just get rid of all of this. And to be honest, I don't even know if this really even works. So we'll just refactor it really quickly. So we want to get the window size from the document model. You may or may not have one. So I want to check to see if we have a valid window size. So if we don't have a valid, or if we do have a valid window size, we want to do something different. Actually, to simplify things, we'll just say if we don't care if it has a size 0, so we'll just set it if it has a size. So all right, getting a little rusty. Oh, gotta add that. Okay, so basically we've done a very simple amount of things to do to get rid of all of this. Now, one thing we're not doing here is setting the window size. This is actually sets the size. Not sure why we need to do it this way, but we can get rid of it. But let's look for other configure documents in here before we get rid of it completely. Yeah, so that didn't even make any sense. Let's comment this out because this should all be handled already, but let's see what happens. Aha, so it isn't handled already. So let's fix that. Or actually see if deleting that was the problem. So maybe this needs to go over here. So this is all window controller, but this let's go to the layers table control because I don't like how this is looking. So we have a grid layer, but we don't really have a method that says, hey, add a grid layer if empty. So let's go ahead and do that. So what we're just going to do is, if there's no grid layer, let's just create one. Simplify that quite a bit. And there we go. We got it back. Precisely what we want. So that means we have other things to get rid of. Get rid of this guy because I don't think we call it anymore. And let's get rid of, oh, we ended up in the restore. So another good stopping point. So I'm going to commit this and we'll move on. Now we're back and we have more things to get rid of. All those changes we just made means that we probably don't need this anymore. Reset the did load here. Don't need it anymore. Don't need this here anymore. And that gets rid of did load. All right. So what do we have left? We need that. We need write for URL. We need make window controllers. That's definitely document. Add data layer. So once again, this doesn't necessarily have to be here. And it's actually being called by the window controller. Let's bring this over here. There we are. Back to the document. So this is just a pathway into document, and then document just does this. Can we move this over? Let's see what happens if we try. So we'll need some sort of property to maintain the sheet. Bring that over. It looks like it all takes. That was a very simple change after all. That means we also get rid of this guy. All right, let's go back to where we were. Now we have this import table. Who calls this? Also the window controller. I'm just going to do exactly the same thing we just did. Move this out. We need to bring the table import coordinator. We are importing that here, so we don't need it. Get rid of that out of here. And now our interface is just a standard document interface. In theory, we can totally get rid of a lot of this stuff as it is. So we're doing great. What do we have left? We have this dataset column provider protocol. It's kind of like hanging out here for no apparent reason. So who calls this again? This seems like something the document model should be doing and not. Does anybody use this anymore? All right. Now before I jump into this, because this is going to be a little bit of a refactor if the code isn't already there. So I'm going to make a commit real quick and I'll be back. I did a little bit of investigation on what's really going on here. And you can see that we have a method existing already in the document model that does exactly what this does. We have two separate methods to handle that, and what's weird about it is this is meant to handle if there's an error, and so it returns an array no matter what. We can refactor this. So we're going to get rid of this protocol, at least this conformance to this protocol. Let's just get rid of it all and make sure we're not conforming to this anywhere. So let's go to the document. This is a throwing function. So we won't necessarily use this anymore. We're going to use what we actually have for the protocol. And we're going to conform to it. Other ways we could do that, but this will do it real quickly. So we need to check to see where we create this. So this is a little bit different because this is now a throwing function. Let's see if we got an error here somewhere. There we go. So we need to account for the try catch. So do and catch. So we want to do this. Lets me try it. And what we want to do, if we catch, we have the logger. And then we want to set it to an empty array. And then here we don't need to do that again. And we just set our columns. So this is an area where we actually have a test. So that's exciting. That means we might have a test that will work here. Great, test work. So I'm going to make a quick commit and I'll come back. Here we are again in the document. If we start scrolling down, we see that our document has gotten to be very small, only 192 lines. This is where we want to be with the document model, or excuse me, the document. There's definitely a lot of improvement we can make in here, but this is quite a big accomplishment, but there is a problem. So everything looks like it's functioning normally, but it isn't. One thing I found through testing is trying to delete a table. It doesn't work. Why is that? Well, it didn't really work beforehand. Let's take a look at the code. Go to the window controller. We have a delete table action. So let's flip through here and let's hit delete. We get in there, right where we're supposed to be. We check how many rows we have, and boom, we had none. So we hover over this table list. We don't have a table list. What's going on here? So what exactly is the table list? Let's find out. Table list controller, and we have set table list. Who calls this? Nobody. Is this in the header? Yes. Nobody's calling this, so let's just trash it. So we have a table list. Who's calling the table? Seemingly nobody. We do it here and here. Let's change this a bit. So one thing we could do is we now populated table list here. So in theory, that should all work. Rebuild it. We're getting in there. We now have tables, so we know we're getting in. So this is a bit of a complicated deletion. As I may have mentioned before, that this will be a cascading delete. I'll delete the table and all associated layers. That will change in the future when the tables are a little bit disconnected, but right now they're connected. So see what happens. No error, and all the layers are disconnected. But wait, the table's still there. That should be happening. So why is that still there? Let's go to the document model real quick. Let's see, delete. Here we go. This is what we're calling delete table. And we tell the in-memory store to drop it. Okay, so let's take a look at what's going on here and why it's not working. We have in the document model, we have a method or a function that says delete table by string. And we call the in-memory store to drop. And there it is. Get the SQLite store. We call drop table. Execute that query, but after that we don't do anything. That's a bit of a problem. So if we look up at the protocol list at the top, we have update table names. And this is what will update the tables in the document model, and therefore our view. So we have a few spots where we're doing that. And this one's most interesting. We update the table names and then dispatch to main. So let's go ahead and do that same thing. We update the table names, dispatch to main, and update. So let's try this again. Let's take a look at the code because we didn't actually save it. Now it's gone. We fixed that bug. Okay. Let me run tests real quick. You probably need some more testing, but this has gone on long enough. All right. So this particular bug also brings up a problem, is that I'm getting a little nervous about how much of the in-memory store is still inside the document. We still initialize the document model with the in-memory store. We have to create that object here to do proper dependency injection. But realistically now, the only thing that we have keeping us using the SQLite store in the background are the data tables. So that's going to have to be a significant change coming up soon. The other change is our code has gotten very small. We are really close to getting rid of the Objective-C version of the document. And in consequence, a lot of these little Objective-C calls or modifiers to these methods are going to start going away. I'm pretty excited about that. But let's go ahead and make a commit and we'll call it there. So we'll see what happens next time. My name is Tom and I hope you enjoyed refactoring Powerlevel.